The evening had taken on a weight Sarah hadn't anticipated. The moment Ryan had confessed, the room seemed to shrink, compressing the space between them until the air itself felt charged. She could feel it, a tremor in her chest, a pull she couldn't name, and a caution that battled with curiosity. The familiarity of their living room, the soft glow of the lamp, the faint scent of lemon cleaner and warm tea lingering in the air no longer felt comforting. Instead, it had become a stage for something fragile, volatile, and undeniable. Ryan's eyes remained on her, calm but intense, as though he were searching for any sign of encouragement or rejection. Sarah felt the heat rising in her cheeks. She wanted to tell him to leave, to return to safety and normalcy. But every fiber of her body seemed rooted in place, as if the room itself demanded she stay and confront the storm that had just been unleashed. Sarah. Ryan's voice broke her thoughts. Soft, tentative, almost hesitant. He spoke her name as though saying it aloud lent him courage, but also as though acknowledging the reality of their situation dangerous, complicated, and thrilling in ways neither of them could deny. Her throat constricted. She tried to summon words, tried to ground herself, but the tide of emotion rising inside her made speech impossible. Finally, she managed a whisper. "Ryan, we can't." He shook his head slowly, interrupting her gently but firmly. "I know what you're going to say. I know it's not simple. I know you're thinking about Ethan, Mark, everything that's right and proper. But I can't ignore this anymore. Not tonight. Not when I've carried it for so long." Sarah's mind reeled. He had carried it for so long. She pictured the years. Ethan laughing in the living room while Ryan quietly offered her a knowing smile from across the couch. Evenings when Ryan lingered just a little longer than he should. Small gestures of thoughtfulness she had never recognized as more than polite friendship. And now it all seemed charged with a weight she had never understood until tonight. She rose from the sofa, walking slowly toward the window. The darkened street outside was quiet, almost serene. Streetlights cast their yellow glow on the pavement, illuminating the falling leaves and the occasional shadow of a passing car. She thought about boundaries, about the line between right and wrong, and the life she had carefully built. And yet, the memory of Ryan's face, his nervous posture, his honesty refused to leave her. "I can't just let this happen," she said, her voice trembling slightly, even as she tried to sound firm. "It's wrong. You're Ethan's friend. And I have responsibilities, Mark, our life." Ryan rose as well, moving closer. His presence was sudden, yet not aggressive. He seemed unsure, almost delicate, as though he feared breaking the fragile barrier between them. "Sarah, I'm not asking you to act on it. Not now, not ever. I needed to tell you how I feel. I couldn't leave without it." She turned to face him, her eyes searching his. For a brief moment she allowed herself to see the boy, who had grown into this thoughtful, nervous young man, carrying feelings she hadn't imagined possible. Her heart clenched at the innocence and sincerity of it. "Ryan, you're brave," she whispered. "I can see that. But bravery doesn't make it right. It just makes it more real." He took a cautious step closer, his voice lowering, almost to a whisper. "Real is what matters, Sarah. We can't always control who we care about or what we feel. All we can do is be honest about it." Her mind raced, conflicted. She wanted to step back, to reclaim her composure, to reassert control over the situation. And yet, there was something about the tension in the room, the raw honesty in his words, that made her hesitate. She remembered the evenings alone, the quiet ache of Mark's absence, the loneliness she had carefully masked with routine and busy work. And she realized, with a jolt of shame and longing, that Ryan's confession had stirred something she hadn't acknowledged in years. I don't know how to handle this, she admitted softly. Her voice was vulnerable, trembling with emotion. I've tried to live within the lines of what's right, of what's safe. But tonight, I feel lost. Ryan nodded, his expression a mix of understanding and quiet pain. I know. I feel it too. And I'm not asking for answers. I'm not asking for anything other than honesty. But I had to say it. I had to tell you. The tension between them was palpable now, a delicate web of emotion stretched taut. Every breath seemed louder, every small movement magnified. Sarah could feel the heat in her chest, the subtle ache that rose with the truth of his confession. And she realized that for the first time in years, she felt truly seen not as a mother, not as a wife, but as a woman with her own desires, her own longings, her own hidden vulnerabilities. She remembered the small moments that had seemed insignificant. At the time, Ryan offering her a blanket when she had shivered, lingering to talk after Ethan had gone to bed, catching her eye in a way that always seemed to carry more than casual attention. She had dismissed these as simple gestures of kindness, but now she saw them differently, as glimpses of something deeper, something unspoken, something forbidden yet undeniable. Ryan's voice broke her thoughts. Sarah, I know this might be wrong. I know it's complicated, but I can't keep pretending I don't feel this. Every time I see you, every time I'm here, I feel it stronger, and I can't ignore it anymore. Her fingers trembled, though she kept them clasped in her lap. She wanted to tell him to leave, to restore order and control. And yet, she felt a pull she couldn't resist, a magnetic force, drawing her closer to the truth of what they both felt. She looked into his eyes, and for a fleeting moment, she allowed herself to imagine a world where none of the boundaries existed, where she could acknowledge the longing that had stirred. In her heart, it was intoxicating, dangerous, and entirely forbidden. Ryan, she whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. I can't. I shouldn't. He reached out, hesitating, as though afraid to overstep, yet unable to resist the connection that had formed between them. His hand hovered near hers, trembling slightly. I know, he said softly. I don't expect anything. I just wanted you to know. That's all. That I had to be honest. I couldn't go another day pretending it wasn't true. The room seemed suspended in time, the air thick with emotion and unspoken longing. Sarah's heart raced, caught between caution and curiosity, fear and desire. She knew the consequences, the stakes, the fragile line they were balancing on. And yet, she couldn't move, couldn't look away, couldn't deny the effect of his honesty, his vulnerability, his presence. A flashback struck her a summer afternoon years ago. Ryan had stayed to help Ethan with a project. She had been in the kitchen, watching them, smiling at their laughter, unaware of the seeds of attachment that had quietly formed in his heart. And now, those seeds had grown into something undeniable, something raw and beautiful, something that demanded acknowledgement. I need a moment, she whispered, turning slightly away, pressing her hands to her face. Her body shook with emotion she hadn't anticipated, a mixture of guilt, longing, and awe at the truth before her. Ryan remained still, giving her the space she needed, though his gaze never wavered from her. The tension between them was electric, fragile, and intoxicating all at once. He had confessed, and she had listened, and now the balance of their world had shifted irreversibly. The room was silent except for the faint, ticking of the clock and the distant hum of the neighborhood outside. And in that quiet, Sarah realized something undeniable. Their lives would never be the same again. The air was thick with possibilities, each more dangerous and thrilling than the last. And as Sarah took a slow, trembling breath, she knew that whatever happened next, whatever choices they made, would define not just the evening, but the course of their lives. She didn't yet know how she would navigate this new reality. She didn't yet know if she could resist the pull of her own heart, or the intensity of Ryan's truth. But one thing was certain. Nothing could ever return to the simplicity of before. And as Ryan waited, quietly, patiently, Sarah felt the first stirrings of something she hadn't felt in years. A longing she could neither name nor suppress, and a fear that the truth they now shared could either destroy them or ignite something entirely unexpected. The quiet of the living room pressed down on them, a weight Sarah couldn't quite place. Ryan sat stiffly on the edge of the sofa, hands folded tightly in his lap, eyes darting to every corner of the room before returning to her face. Gaze drifted over him, taking in the subtle changes that had happened since she last saw him slightly taller, a faint shadow of worry beneath his eyes, the nervous way he tucked his fingers into the sleeves of his jacket. He looked like a boy on the edge of a decision that might change everything. She wanted to speak first, to break the tension, but the words stuck in her throat. The last time Ryan had been here, he had been nothing more than Ethan's loyal friend. Polite and careful, always leaving when he felt his welcome had overstayed. But tonight, there was something different, something heavier, more urgent. The clock ticked loudly on the wall. Each second seemed magnified, echoing between them like the beats of a drum, marking the approach of something inevitable. Ryan. Sarah's voice was soft, almost a whisper. She tried to keep it casual, to keep the moment anchored in familiarity. "You can tell me anything. What's going on?" He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple moving nervously. For a long moment he didn't speak, and the silence pressed harder against them. Sarah felt it in her chest, a tightness she couldn't shake. She studied his hands, clenched tightly together, the way his thumb rubbed over his fingers as if he were trying to calm himself. "I know this is strange," he finally said, his voice low, hesitant. "I shouldn't even be here. Not like this." Sarah felt a pang of curiosity. Strange? Not like this? Her heart quickened, an unexplainable flutter she hadn't felt in years. "What do you mean?" she asked gently. "Ryan, you're scaring." "Emmy." He looked up at her, and she noticed the way his gaze held hers, intense and raw. Something unspoken lingered in his eyes, an emotion she couldn't name but recognized instantly as dangerous. "I've been keeping something from you," he said, the words spilling out faster than he expected. "Something I shouldn't. Something I wasn't supposed to feel." Sarah's stomach tightened. Her mind raced, trying to process what he could possibly mean. She opened her mouth to ask another question, but the words died before they formed. Instead, she felt the old, familiar pang of worry and curiosity combined, a cocktail of emotions she hadn't realized she'd missed. He inhaled sharply, as if gathering the courage to continue, and then he began. "Ever since I first came to your house years ago, I've admired you." The words hung in the air, weighty and startling. Sarah blinked, unsure if she had heard him correctly. "Admired me?" she asked cautiously. "Yes," he whispered, almost urgently. "I know it's wrong. I know it's complicated, but I can't lie anymore. I've always felt something for you." Her chest constricted. Admiration. Something he'd always felt. For her. She felt a strange warmth, mingled with a pang of guilt. Ryan was Ethan's friend, her son's friend, and yet, here he was, sitting in her living room, confessing feelings she had never imagined he could harbor. Sarah tried to find words, tried to formulate a reply that would calm her heart and his, but nothing came. Her mind drifted back to earlier days, when Ryan had been a constant presence in their home, helping with homework, laughing over movies, quietly polite. She remembered his shy smile, the way he had always seemed to notice, her small efforts, the little tray of cookies she baked, the extra blanket she offered on cold nights. At the time, she had seen it as kindness, nothing more. But now it felt like those small gestures had been part of something much larger, something she had never recognized until this very moment. "Ryan," she said finally, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to keep it steady. I don't know what to say. You're Ethan's friend. You're young. This isn't something that should be happening." He nodded, almost painfully, as though he had anticipated her reaction. I know all of that. Believe me, I've tried to ignore it, to pretend it didn't exist. But every time I see you, every time I come here, I feel it stronger. I can't stop it." The room seemed smaller, the walls closing in as his words hung between them. Sarah's mind raced. She thought of Mark, her husband, and the life they had built together. She thought of Ethan, and how she could never betray his trust, or the trust that existed within their little family. And yet she couldn't deny the odd, unsettling warmth that Ryan's confession had stirred in her chest. A memory flashed briefly, Ryan laughing on the couch one afternoon, hair falling into his eyes as he teased Ethan over a video game. She had smiled then, quietly amused at his boyish charm, but never imagining that those small moments were laying the groundwork for something far more intense. Ryan shifted slightly, leaning forward, his gaze never leaving hers. "I know it's wrong to say this. I know it might even ruin everything between us. But I had to tell you. I can't hold it in anymore. I just had to be honest with you." Sarah swallowed, her throat tight. She had to think, had to ground herself, but her heart betrayed her, pounding in a rhythm she hadn't felt since. She didn't even know when. She wanted to step away, to tell him firmly that this couldn't happen. And yet, she was rooted in place, drawn to the sincerity in his eyes, to the tremor in his voice that betrayed how much courage it had taken for him to admit this. Her fingers itched to reach out, to touch his hand, to offer some sign that she understood the turmoil he must have endured. But she resisted, knowing that any small gesture could unravel the careful control she had maintained over her emotions for so long. "Ryan," she said softly, trying to steady herself, "you're brave for telling me this, but I can't respond the way you might hope. This isn't just about feelings. There are too many things at stake. You're Ethan's friend. You're young. And She trailed off, unsure if she should even say it aloud. He leaned back, slightly, a shadow crossing his face. I know all of it, and I wouldn't want to pressure you. I needed you to know. I couldn't let another day pass without telling you how I feel." The room fell silent again, thick with unspoken emotions. Sarah's mind raced, flipping between logic and instinct, between caution and curiosity. She remembered the countless evenings Ryan had spent in their home, the small kindnesses that had always felt innocent, now taking on a different, heavier weight. She remembered her own moments of loneliness Mark away, Ethan busy with friends, the quiet that sometimes pressed down so heavily, it felt almost suffocating. Her chest tightened as she realized just how much Ryan's presence affected her, how His words had already begun to stir emotions she had long kept buried. She felt a mixture of guilt, fear, and something dangerously close to longing. Ryan's gaze softened, and he reached out, hesitating, unsure. "I won't push," he said quietly. "I just wanted you to know. I just wanted to be honest." Sarah felt her hand tremble slightly, though she kept it still in her lap. She wanted to say something, anything, but the words escaped her. All she could do was look at him, seeing the truth in his eyes, feeling the intensity of his emotion. The room seemed suspended in time, the world outside fading into a blur. She thought of the consequences, of the life she had carefully constructed. And yet, for the first time in years, she felt the stirrings of something forbidden, something dangerous, something she didn't want to ignore. A knock at the door echoed faintly in her memory, the first part of their evening, and she realized that the simple act of Ryan showing up had already shifted something fundamental between them. And as Ryan waited, vulnerability exposed, Sarah felt a shiver run through her. She didn't know what she would do next, or how she could navigate the storm of feelings that had suddenly risen. But one thing was certain: nothing would be the same after this confession. The air between them was heavy with anticipation, with the unspoken acknowledgement that lives, hearts, and loyalties were now delicately balanced on a knife's edge. And as Sarah took a slow, trembling breath, she knew that whatever came next would demand choices she had never imagined she would face, and that the consequences could ripple far beyond just the two of them. The house was too quiet. Sarah Collins set her book down on the arm of the sofa and let the silence settle around her like a blanket she couldn't quite get comfortable beneath. Normally, she loved evenings like this, peaceful, uneventful, the gentle hum of her suburban home in Portland, carrying her through the hours until sleep. But that night was different. The silence pressed against her chest in a way that felt almost heavy, almost expectant, as if something unseen hovered just outside the edges of her awareness, waiting to break through. Her husband Mark was away, on another business trip, something that had become routine over the last few years. His work in consulting often kept him traveling between states, attending meetings and conferences that always seemed to pop up at the worst possible times. Sarah had long grown used to his absence. At first, she used to count the days until his return, planning dinners and small surprises to make the house feel alive again when he walked through the door. But as the years stretched on, she had stopped counting, stopped expecting. She told herself it was easier this way, to accept the rhythm of their marriage as it was. Present when he was home, distant when he Ethan, her son, was spending the evening out with friends. He had just turned 19, a college freshman, with a newfound taste of independence. Sarah adored him, though lately she felt him slipping away in small, almost invisible ways. The late nights, the short replies, the way he often glanced at his phone even when she tried to talk to him. She reminded herself this was normal, that boys his age grew into men who needed space, that sometimes she missed the little boy who used to curl up on the couch beside her and beg for one more bedtime story. Now it was just her and the silence. She glanced at the clock on the wall. 8:47 p.m. The house was neat, the dishes stacked, the counters wiped, the faint scent of lemon cleaner still lingering in the air. She had poured herself a glass of red wine earlier but barely touched it, letting it sit beside her as she pretended to read the same page over and over again. The book's words blurred together. Her mind wandered. She thought about Mark, where he might be at that very moment. In a hotel room, a quiet restaurant after a long day of meetings, or maybe in conversation with strangers who knew him in ways she didn't anymore. Sometimes she wondered if distance didn't just mark the miles between them, but the spaces inside their marriage as well. She shook off the thought, feeling guilty for even letting it cross her mind. A faint sound jolted her from her thoughts. She sat still, her ears straining. At first, she thought she had imagined it. But then it came again, a knock at the door. Her brows knitted. She wasn't expecting anyone. The neighborhood was safe, and her neighbors usually texted before stopping by. For a moment she considered ignoring it, but the knock came once more, firmer this time, as though whoever stood outside knew she was home. Sarah rose slowly, her bare feet brushing against the cool hardwood floor as she made her way toward the entryway. Her pulse quickened, though she told herself there was no reason for alarm. Maybe Ethan had forgotten his key. Maybe it was a delivery left too late. She reached for the doorknob and hesitated. Through the frosted glass of the side window, she could just make out a figure. Tall, broad-shouldered. Not Ethan. Her heart gave a small leap. She opened the door cautiously, pulling it just wide enough to see, and froze. "Ryan?" she asked, surprised. Standing on her doorstep was Ryan Turner, one of Ethan's closest friends. She recognized him instantly, though in the dim porch light his features seemed sharper than she remembered. His brown hair fell untidily across his forehead, his jacket zipped halfway, as if he had left somewhere in a hurry. His hands were shoved into his pockets, his shoulders drawn up slightly, as though he were carrying the weight of something he hadn't yet decided how to put down. "Hi, Mrs. Collins," he said softly. His voice was calm, but there was a nervous undercurrent beneath it. Sarah blinked, still trying to process his presence. She hadn't seen Ryan in weeks, maybe months. Back when Ethan was in high school, Ryan had been a constant fixture in their house. He was polite, always offering to help carry groceries or clear the table, often staying late to watch movies with Ethan in the living room. Sarah had always liked him. He seemed more mature than the other boys, thoughtful in ways that set him apart. But tonight, something about him was different. "Ryan, what are you doing here?" "Ethan's not home," she said, her voice carrying equal parts surprise and curiosity. He shifted, his gaze flicking briefly to the ground before meeting hers again. "I know. I wasn't looking for him." Sarah tilted her head, confusion rippling through her. She pulled the door open wider. "Then, why are you here?" For a long moment he didn't answer. The silence between them stretched, filled only by the faint hum of distant traffic and the rustle of leaves in the evening breeze. Then he finally spoke. I needed to talk to someone, and I thought of you." Her brows lifted slightly, though her expression softened. She could see now that his eyes held something heavy, something unspoken. "Well," she said gently, stepping aside. "Come in, it's cold out." Ryan hesitated for just a beat before crossing the threshold. As he stepped inside, Sarah caught the faint scent of his cologne, something subtle and clean that contrasted with the sharp crispness of the night air. She closed the door behind him and turned, studying him more closely now. He seemed restless, his movements uncertain, his gaze flickering around the familiar room, as if seeing it for the first time in years. "Do you want something to drink? Water? Tea?" she offered, slipping into her natural role as hostess. Shook his head quickly. "No, thank you, I'm fine." They moved into the living room, and Sarah gestured for him to sit. He lowered himself onto the edge of the couch, his posture stiff, as though he couldn't quite let himself relax. Sarah took her place across from him, curling her legs beneath her, her eyes watching him with quiet curiosity. The silence returned, stretching once more. She wanted to ask a dozen questions. Why now? Why her? Why tonight? But something about his expression kept her from pushing too quickly. Instead, she waited. Ryan ran a hand through his hair, exhaling slowly. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, careful, almost rehearsed. I know this is strange. I shouldn't have come here like this, but I couldn't hold it in anymore. Sarah's pulse quickened again, though she wasn't sure why. Something about the way he said it, the intensity in his tone, made her chest tighten. Hold what in? She asked softly. His eyes lifted to meet hers, and in that moment, she saw something in them she had never noticed before, something raw, vulnerable and deeply unsettling. Ryan's jaw tensed, as if he were waging a silent battle within himself. He parted his lips, then closed them again, struggling for the right words. Sarah leaned forward ever so slightly, caught between concern and the faintest flicker of unease. And then, before he could speak, a sudden gust rattled the windows, startling them both. The sound broke the moment, but not the tension. Sarah's heart drummed in her ears. She realized, with a clarity that both unsettled and intrigued her, that whatever Ryan had come to say, it was not something simple, not something casual. The quiet of her house was no longer empty. It was charged, alive, pulsing with something she didn't yet understand. And as she sat there, waiting for Ryan to open his mouth again, Sarah felt the faintest chill creep over her skin, because deep down, she knew that whatever he was about to tell her, it would change everything.